This is a presentation of Northeast Streaming Sports.
And good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Saturday Morning Debate Show with Mac and Jack and Pags and Paul. And here we are, ladies and gentlemen, to talk 2 hours of great sports talk. We have a lot of great comments, a lot of great ideas, a lot of great questions. How are you all doing today?
Good. I mean, there's football fever in the air, but if you guys want to talk about baseball, I'm always game for that too.
Well, I think we have a lot of football questions today, and I think we have some baseball questions, and I think we have all sorts of great things. So, hey, you know what? The big story, of course, does revolve around the NFL and, the tragic situation. Thank God it wasn't as tragic as it could have been because he is now doing much better. But Damar Hamlin and the Monday Night Football game. So let's just jump into that. Did the NFL handle that well? Did they do a bad job? If they did a bad job, did they fix it? Was it good from the start? What do you think? What are your opinions on how this whole thing has shaked out? Of course, the best news, of course, is that he's well. He's doing well. He talked to his team yesterday through a Zoom, and I think everything is good in that regard. But how do you feel the NFL did with that whole situation on Monday night?
I'm going to just say, as it was unfolding, as time was going by, I was asking, why doesn't the NFL just suspend the darn game? Let's hear that it officially is off. But at the end, no harm was done. They didn't resume playing. They didn't start warming up the play. The controversy was Joe Buck, the announcer, said they're going to have a 5-minute break or something, and then they're going to start getting ready to resume play. But there were no indications from watching the players that they were ever actually going to resume play. The two coaches met, they discussed it. But the thing was, there were so many people in the stands. And if the game wasn't going to resume, why keep them there? Why keep them there about an extra hour hanging around at that time of night? But at the end, no harm was done. This was a unique situation. And I think it would be nitpicking to really get on the NFL about this at this point.
Yeah, listen, I think we all will agree that they did a good job, with what happened. This really never has happened before in football. Once before, a player did die, Detroit Lion wide receiver, back, I think it was 1971. And, of course, they didn't have all the, the technology they have today. And the ambulance came right out of the field, and they revived them, thank God, on the field. I think more the question is, what's going to happen now with that game, and how's it going to affect the playoffs? I mean, right now they're talking three of the games are going to be on a neutral field. They're not sure, when the wild card games, who's going to have home field advantage, which, a lot of teams fight for that during the season. They want home field advantage. So this one thing that happened affects the whole AFC playoffs. And, whether it's appropriate to say or not, is that fair? Is that fair to ask a team that fought that hard for a home field advantage not to have that now? And, you got families involved. You've got the players, the coaches, their families involved in this decision. And that's probably something that is more interesting to me than the actual, event itself.
Yeah, I think you bring up a good question, and I'm going to take it away from the tragedy and the player having cardiac arrest, and my goodness, that's all scary and frightening. And again, thank God he's okay, or seems to be okay. But one of the comments I made when the Astros had cheated their way to the World Series was they didn't just cheat the fans of the Yankees or whomever or whatever. They cheated an entire city out of an opportunity, and people who park cars and work in restaurants and work in hotels and sell merchandise and do any number of million jobs, maitre d's and et cetera, et cetera. All those people would have had an opportunity to make more money and provide better for their families and all that if the games were the Astros didn't cheat their way to taking all of those opportunities away from somebody in a city. So I think that type of big picture thinking, Mac, is important as the NFL tries to figure out what to do here, because if there's, they have games that are going to be played this weekend that will determine which team makes the wild card, which team gets home field advantage. And those have big time residual effects on cities and stuff. So I guess the question is, how should the NFL handle this so that it's fair to all the different cities and things like playing it in a neutral site? Is that fair? If you have a city that's worked real hard, or a team that's worked real hard to provide for this big game and this big money-making event, hopefully next Sunday or whatever, and then all of a sudden the game's played somewhere else, how does the NFL figure this out in a way that benefits everybody and also takes into consideration the fact that they're dealing with an unprecedented situation, and also to have a standard for going forward to make sure that, God forbid, if something like this happens again, that there is a policy and a procedure in place that everybody can follow? Those are big questions. What do you think?
Well, I have a whole difference of opinion, but just to give you an idea and show, this is all the different scenarios that will occur for this, obviously. So this shows every different type of situation possible where Kansas City, Buffalo. The one problem that I have with this is that with Cincinnati relinquishing that game, they are the ones that really are they really get beat up twice about this now. Of course, they couldn't say, "Hey, listen, we need to play this game." There was no way to do that. They would have been chastised to no end had they forced this game to continue. And because of that, so they show compassion to the whole Bill organization, which is understandable. You have to. This is that there was no way that they could have played that game. However, because of that, now they wind up, holding the short end of the stick. Not just here, but if they were to lose this week, by beating Buffalo, they would have clinched the division, and this game would have been meaningless against the Ravens. Well, now, because they didn't play that game, it's possible the Ravens could still win the division. And if they were to win the division, or it was to come to where there's a tie for the division except by points, a coin toss would be what actually determines whether they're going to have a neutral field or they're going to play a game. So it's possible that Cincinnati could wind up having no home games, and because of the fact that they were compassionate to the Bills. And I find that, like really unfair. It's
this is
like
an idea.
that the Bills. Good.
Pax, this is an idea, guys. I know it might be laughable. It took us so long to get a Speaker of the House. What about this idea? You get the owners together of the teams involved, have them sit down in a room and try to work out something that they can all agree on that's fair. And if they all agree on a plan that's fair, all the owners, just maybe go with that, because anything the NFL does is going to.
What I just showed you is the plan that they went with. This is the plan.
But people are going to always be left unhappy over something. But if you have all the owners sit down and maybe work something out, because I don't think there's a perfect solution no matter what you do. And like I pointed out with Pags on and Thursday and Mac yesterday, the Bengals did have a 4-point lead in that game before the accident happened. And should that count for something at all, like a 4-point advantage? Because they were technically winning the game. Let's say, I joked about baseball in the beginning of the show. I just made a joke. But let's say it was a 5-inning game in baseball and one team's ahead. They win the game even though you don't complete it if it's rained out after that. If you can't make it up, the team that's winning at the time, granted, it was early in the game. It wasn't late in the game, the Bengals and Buffalo. And also a point could be brought up too. Is this a little bit of an advantage to the Bengals and the Bills in the playoffs that they only played a small part of the game? The extra rest they might be getting for not playing the full game, could that be an indirect advantage to both teams going into the playoffs because they're having just a little more, physical rest?
Well, let me ask this question. Understanding the severity of what happened and everything, but why can't the NFL have a policy that if a game is suspended, that game, like baseball would, gets resumed the very next day, and you just if a baseball game is suspended or whatever, I don't know how this all works sometimes, but
So
either
this
start
became
you
this
start it
became a
fresh
human
or you
issue.
pick up where the game was delayed.
This became a human issue. The issue became like at what type of level should you be sensitive to the Bills organization? So if this happens in Buffalo, I think it's probably more likely that they can resume the next day or in 2 days. However, I feel that because in Cincinnati and because it was a Buffalo player, they went back home because the one thing, when you're human and you witness something like this, the one thing that you want to do right away is hug the people that you love the most, because you realize how fragile life is, and that's really that was really what occurred on Monday night. You know what I mean? That everybody got another awakening of the fact that life is a precious situation and that at any moment any one of us could die. You know what I mean? And that it's that's a big deal. That's a big deal. So, you have to have certain level of compassion for the players themselves and, the team that was not home wants to get home because they want to be able to share their emotions and feelings with their family.
Guys, perhaps the Bills weren't in any emotional position to play the next day. But this is my theory, okay? Let's say 3 days later, Damar Hamlin is much, much better, a sigh of relief. They can maybe start getting back to normal. Let's say they resume the game from Monday night to Thursday night. I'm just throwing this idea out. Don't laugh. What about then playing against Sunday, but using your backups? Kind of like in baseball, your best pitchers don't go on 2 days rest, okay? You get the best of the rest out there and play against Sunday. Allow them to expand the roster because of a unique situation. They play their practice squad players, their third stringers, their second stringers. I know it's an important game, but it's extenuating circumstances. And everyone on the roster, the players that are hardly used, are going to play the bulk of the following game 3 days late on the Sunday if you play on the Thursday. I know you jam.
See, I think part of that, then you're going to have certain players that are going to want to go because of the severity and the importance of the game, and then you're in essence, you are taking some of the competitive juices that some of these players may have, and you're using it against them.
Okay, but listen what Mac always says, how tougher the guys were in the past, the old timers. In part, they were tougher because it was the mindset was tougher. Not that they were physically tougher. The mindset was tougher. If the mindset says they have to play again 3 days apart, you do it. Your mind is into it. It's hard work. It's overtime. but it could actually be done if push came to shove.
I mean, my opinion is so much different than everybody else's. I feel that Buffalo should have been forced to forfeit this. That it was, as even as unfortunate of a situation it was a Buffalo player. It was the compassion that the Cincinnati Bengals gave to the Bills to not require them to finish out the game.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So realistically, that this should have been a forfeit to the Bills, because again, it was like I said, the human aspect of this that created the situation. So that in theory they should be the ones that are, I that just should take it on the chin. You know what I mean?
And
Because
then,
listen, it was a real situation that occurred, and everybody did everything human for that franchise, and now because of that they get benefits from this, and I
Don't
don't think
don't
that that's right.
don't you think the only fair thing left to do for all the teams involved in the AFC is let the Bills and Cincinnati Bengals play, start it from where the game ended, and whoever wins wins, and then seed them that way. That way,
when are they going to play, Mac? When?
I don't care if it's next week. So they extended a week, Jeff. So what?
They have games Sunday and then the playoffs begin. But they can't do it after Sunday because the playoffs are beginning. You can't have someone go on short rest into the playoffs.
Yeah, so this is the question I posed before. Obviously, we're dealing now with a new situation, something that's never happened before. But shouldn't the NFL come up with a rule that says, let's be honest, NFL is a tough physical game. Now, couldn't this happen again? Isn't it possible that something like this could happen again? Haven't we seen plenty of games where guys are carted off the field with neck injuries and people don't know how they're going to respond and things like that? This wasn't the first time there was a major injury on a field. It was the first time it was cardiac arrest like this that we've seen. But my point is, now that it's happened, shouldn't the NFL have some type of a rule in place that says, God forbid something else bad happens, this is what we're going to do to make sure that everything is fair going forward? And so my question would be, if you know ahead of time that you still have to play the next day, yeah, let's let everybody end the game. We have a terrible situation to deal with, but just know we've got to come back tomorrow. That's what happens like in baseball, right? You come back if there's a reason for a game to be stopped, you come back the next day. So that's really the question I'm asking. Is that possible? Is that an idea so that the game gets played? And why not?
Doc, I'm going to tell you why not. Back to baseball again. Thurman Munson gets killed tragically in a plane crash August 2nd, 1979. The Yankees are headed to the funeral. They got a game. And they don't know, can they come back in time, this and that. And they spoke to George Steinbrenner. George Steinbrenner said, well, we're just going to have to then forfeit the game. We can't get back. The Orioles, who were in a good shape in 79, went to the World Series, as it turned out, said, no, we'll do the right thing. The league will do the right thing. They were looking to grab a forfeit. And I went to a Yankee game a couple of days after Munson got killed. The players were like zombies on the field. They weren't functioning at all. Even when Billy Martin was arguing with the umpire, it was so meekly. You could tell he was hurting so badly. I think the solution's this. It just popped into my head.
Let me just go back to the Yankees real fast. 1979, August 2nd, 1979, Thurman Munson dies tragically in a plane crash. Anybody who was a Yankee fan at the time remembers exactly where they were at the time, etc. A defining moment of my youth, the fact that Thurman Munson died, I just unbelievable, and something that still sticks with me today. That was August 2nd. August 3rd, the Yankees had to play. They played the Orioles and they lost 1-0. August 4th, The Yankees had to play. They lost to the Orioles 5-4.
Right. Well, I was at that game. The
August
5-4 game, they
5th,
were
the Yankees
down.
played the Orioles and won 3-2. And then Monday, August 6th was the day they buried Thurman Munson. And that day, the Yankees flew to Canton, Ohio for the funeral. Bobby Mercer delivered the eulogy, and Major League Baseball says you still got to play tonight. And they had to fly back to New York. And then Bobby Mercer, of course, has all the RBIs, the walk-off hit off Tippy Martinez, etc. But the Yankees played.
That was about 5-6 days later, though.
No, but they played the next day. Thurman died on the 2nd.
1-0. They were like zombies. Think of the score. They couldn't even concentrate.
Correct. So, but that's what I'm saying.
But they were out of it.
That's what
correct. So should those games have been canceled? That's what I'm asking.
I have the perfect idea, guys.
That's what Jack. That's what Doc just said. The whole thing you just said.
But
the Yankees had to play.
Tackling football is more difficult. You got to tackle guys. You got to show more emotion out there. You know, it's a different sport. I have an idea what the NFL should do now. You guys put a great idea in my head. The last week of the season, there should be no games scheduled the week before the playoffs. That should be days that games should be made up, weather related.
That's an answer. I like that.
Well,
right.
so I think that you are likely correct that what will happen is that there is going to the institution of the second bye week is going to start to come into play here for future seasons. And I believe that what's going to happen is that the NFL is going to start on Labor Day weekend because they're going to have to. And then going to institute the second bye initially. And then they are going to institute the 18th game. And then, it'll make it so that football will finally get what they want. They want to have the Super Bowl the day before President's Day, so that they can get the day off the next day. I believe that's all in the works here for like 4 more years from now. I believe that this is going to create that to happen in a much sooner path because of this type of situation, that you're going to have it so that there is going to be like the last 2 weeks or 3 weeks of the season, every team is going to have a bye. So that you're going to wind up having, like either in 2 weeks where there's only going to be half the teams playing and then the other half the teams playing, or literally you're not going to have everybody off the same week.
Well, it's good. You're right, Pax. It's good also for these games that are in sub-zero weather. You could put them in the bye week if you have like this emergency weather situation during the season. You just keep that last weekend in your pocket where you could, reschedule these games. Yeah.
Well, I don't believe that you could have a bye week before the playoffs. Yeah, that's just it. Nah, I don't think that works. I mean, if this unfortunate situation happened this week rather than last week, there'd have been even more going on. Because of this. I mean, think about this, that if they had last week's game and this week it was Buffalo versus Cincinnati, in theory, which could be for the absolute number 1 seed, or because it's realistically, if Cincinnati won this game, they'd have been the number 2 seed. In the process of this, like I said, when you take out the sensitivity issue of this, Cincinnati really got screwed here, and I'm saying screwed because ultimately they still have to consider the fact that, they have to play Baltimore, and if Baltimore wins this game, they actually have to go to a coin flip on who wins the division or who gets the home field advantage.
The Giants got to buy this tomorrow. They're playing the Eagles. So that'll be
a bye. It's not a bye.
That'll be our bye.
Well,
it's just right before you're about to go bye-bye. You know what I mean? Because that's,
we're not going to play anybody, so we'll let the Eagles have the win. Let them be happy.
The Giants
but we're talking serious here. We're not talking about funniness here.
Hags, Who would have thought the Giants are ending the season for the final game against the Eagles? They're in better shape. The Eagles need the game much more than the Giants. Who would have thought it?
Yeah, well, and that's just because that's what happens when you stink and you're good enough to be better, the best of a bad bunch.
We stink, all right. We're in the playoffs. We stink.
Hey, listen, congratulations to you on that. You know, that's you guys got more wins this year than you do in the last 3 years combined.
Mm-hmm. And
But
congratulations.
the question
to
is
you
how
guys.
many wins they get going forward, because that's what is going to determine who's the Super Bowl champion. So I'm actually liking Jack's idea. What I keep advocating for is this idea that football needs to have a policy in place. So, God forbid, again, anything like this ever happens, and odds are it probably will, because it's a rough sport. This is what happens. That players are going to get hurt, and they do get hurt in the NFL, that if there's a serious injury situation that results in the game being canceled or postponed, that then game gets made up in that last week that Jack's advocating. My only concern with the whole thing is that nobody really knows what's happening. And as Pags is saying, like a city like Cincinnati is possibly going to be losing out on opportunities to have games there and benefit their economy and the people who live there, because a policy wasn't in place, that nobody really knows what's happening, and they seem to be making it up as they go along. So the idea would be the NFL needs to have a better plan in place. So if something like this happens, everybody knows what's going to go forward. Does anybody know where the neutral site is, by the way? Where's the
They
neutral
have not
site?
determined that. They have not determined that. Because I'm actually kind of hoping a little bit that if Cincinnati and Baltimore wind up, I think that there is like one or maybe two scenarios that they have to play at a neutral site that Philadelphia gets chosen. I would love to go to another playoff game. You know what I mean? That has nothing to do with the Eagles. Like, I think that would be exciting football to watch, other than being on TV and being part of the fans and the fan bases watching a playoff game. I mean, you don't get very many opportunities as a football fan to happen to be in the stadium for that type of atmosphere without having your own team in it.
So,
and I
so
like
the
I like
question,
those types of situations.
the question would be, they have to come
yeah.
up with a fair neutral site. Like what?
Yeah, wouldn't it be better? Wouldn't it be better to put it on in a stadium that doesn't have the playoffs already?
Indianapolis turned it down, Mac. They were offered it,
No,
I heard.
Oh, that's fine. But how about like Arizona or maybe Denver or places like that?
I feel like the reason why I think that, for instance, if Pittsburgh doesn't make the playoffs, and I know that Pittsburgh has opportunities still they're still in the mix in the playoff hunt for the AFC. But if, for instance, if it was Buffalo and Cincinnati in the AFC Championship game, Pittsburgh is really the perfect scenario for them, because it's about equiescent drive or distance between the two. So you wanted to make it so that the fans can easily get to the game without having to rearrange so much.
It's equally cold too.
Right, it's a cold game. It's outdoors. The conditions are as similar as they could be to to what's existing there. So that's why I think that if it's true, you have it in Cleveland, you have it in. I think the one hard part about this is, of course, if Cincinnati plays against Kansas City, they're just got to go to Kansas City. They're stuck in that mix, and that's a shame, because Cincinnati. If Kansas City loses, Cincinnati could have had the number 1 seed, but it doesn't matter now, because they didn't play the game. They don't get the opportunity to ever have the game at their home location. And from Cincinnati.
I had another idea for this year too. 7 teams make the playoffs in the AFC, 7 in the NFC. The Bills and Bengals in the AFC. they're going to be anywhere from 1, 2, or 3. Only the top-rated team gets a bye. That's a big part of this. It's not just home field advantage. The bye might even mean more. Why not give the first 3 teams a bye? Extenuating circumstances, meaning the Bills, the Bengals, and the Chiefs are all going to get a bye, and then whoever gets home field, then so be it. Then the Bengals can't complain because instead of having to win 3 games to get to the Super Bowl, they'll only have to win 2. They'll be given the equivalent of a bye. So even if they have to play the championship game in Buffalo, the point is they would have gotten there by playing 1 less game. They would have been on the less shift.
You could actually do this the opposite way and say that you could have canceled the game between the 49ers, the Chiefs and the Raiders, and so that the Chiefs also only played 16 games, and then go with all the tiebreakers using that type of scenario. So that's actually more realistic than anything else.
You can't cancel a game that could be played. You can't.
But
that.
that's what you're advocating too, Jack, right? Because you'd be canceling a wild card game or a first round playoff game.
Yeah, and you still what you're talking about, they would have to remove 2 playoff teams because you're giving the first 3 teams a bye, which means that you're going to have 5 teams after the rest of the other 4 teams play. Can't do that. So that's the other issue.
I see what you mean. Yeah, you'd be when the smoke cleared, you'd be stuck with 5, and you'd still have to. Okay, we're just throwing out ideas.
Like I said, unfortunately, the only type of circumstance that really made sense here, I mean, short of what the NFL did, because like I said, they wanted to try to keep a competitive advantage here. The problem is that in the process of having the competitive advantage, they are really taking any advantage that Cincinnati had of winning that game against Buffalo away from Cincinnati, because they went in there a game behind Buffalo. So had they won that game, everything would have flip-flopped around. But because chance to play that game, and Cincinnati was the one that, in theory said, hey, listen, we are going to do what's right here and not require the Bills to play this game, they are the ones left holding the short end of the stick. And I feel that realistically, you have to just administer a decision in this game specifically, and say that, and if that would be the case, you'd have to give Buffalo the loss, and Buffalo should accept the loss. Hey, listen, we're not playing this game because of the unfortunate situation that occurred. We appreciate and respect the fact that the Bengals, understood the severity of the situation and allowed us to be with our families during this very unique and sensitive time. And, because of that, we are going to forfeit this game. And take whatever seeding. It's not like that they're getting out of the playoffs because they're not missing the playoffs because of this. They're going to the number 3 seed. They're still going to have a home game. It's still possible that Cincinnati loses and they still have a second home game.
If this were boxing, you'd have 4 sanctioning bodies. One would just call the Bengals the NFL champions. The other would call the Bills the NFL champions. The other would say the winner in the playoffs between the Giants and Vikings wins the vacant title. It's crazy.
Hey, Jack, historically, there have been a number of times during fights. Boom Boom Mancini comes to mind when a boxer has been killed in the ring. Has that ever happened on an undercard?
Yes.
And then what happens?
In Atlantic City, major show. I forgot who was in the main event. I believe it was one of Lennox Lewis's fights, major event. And there's this fighter named Stephen Johnson. He's fighting on the undercard. Now, remember when I get to the press room, I'm just going over my notes and I'm saying, Stephen Johnson, didn't he fail a physical in Canada because of something with his brain waves that he wasn't allowed to fight, and he's fighting here in New Jersey. It crossed my mind. In the ring, ninth round during the fight, he just goes down. Didn't seem to be hit hard, wasn't taking a beating, and he died just like that. I mean, we didn't know he died at that moment, of course, but he's taken out. You knew his life was in danger, similar to Hamlin's, but the show just goes on. It doesn't miss a beat. Maybe because we didn't have social media at that time or we would get updates, but even if we were in boxing, even if we heard he died on his way to the hospital, the show would have resumed. I mean,
And I think that the biggest difference on that is that, so let's change this scenario. Let's go. It's the undercard for the Hagler Hearns fight. And it's on television, not on a pay-per-view or closed circuit television or anything like that. And they're watching, and it's the fight right before the Hagler Hearns fight that this occurs, where everybody's tuning in at that time. They're just starting to get in and start watching. I got to imagine that there may be a little bit of a different thought process.
No, there wouldn't be. I'll give you an example. During one of the WrestleManias, oh wow, I'm having a brain cramp. Bret Hart's brother, famous wrestler.
Owen Hart.
Owen Hart, thank you. He tried one of the gimmicks, got killed in the ring, and they announced it to the crowd, the broadcasters. This isn't show business. We're telling you the truth. Owen Hart died. They informed the people, and the show continued. Okay, it ran its course. It was a pay-per-view event. They didn't go off the air and decide we're refunding the money. They went through with the WWE show, WWF at the time. And, everyone was informed that Owen Hart had died as a result of what he tried to do in the ring, okay? Or something that malfunctioned, some of the equipment. And later, he had a big settlement, his family. They got a reported $18 million from the WWE. But the point is, the show continued. I mean, what do you do in certain circumstances? I mean, a sport like baseball doesn't take a physical toll. If something happened to someone, God forbid, they got hit with a pitch and they died. Thankfully, it only happened once in the history of the game. But let's say it happened at any point in the game, and they knew they would suspend the game at that moment. But even in baseball, if someone got beaten with a pitch and they're taken to the hospital and they're in bad shape, I think the game would continue unless we conclusively knew something horrible happened to them, that they died as a result of that. I think the game continues under any circumstance.
I think you're right.
I believe, again, this is where the human aspect came into play tremendously for this, and that's why, and that's why I can speak so candid about the way that I feel about it, because I didn't watch the game, so I still haven't seen the video of what happened, with the hit, with the way that he fell. I don't know. All I see is a picture of him on the ground, and it's okay. It's that's I guess what looks like a scary scene, but it's not indicative of the fact that, hey, they probably did the replay of this over and over and over again, and that what happened is that, first off, you have 30 million people watching the game in general, and then the moment that this occurs through social media, you have another 25 to 30 million people tuning in who's maybe watching something else, because now they just heard somebody had a heart attack on the field. Everybody's going to immediately switch to that because that's must-see television.
No, they didn't show it again. It was once, and then they didn't show it again. So they never went back. And
but you're watching all of the faces of the players and stuff like that. So you start to formulate an opinion. And let's face it, that NFL and these teams and these players are worshipped like gods. So when a god is struck down, That's in essence kind of, this is very Greek mythology type of stuff that I'm almost explaining it and suggesting it's like, but when something like that happens, it is uh, cataclysmic throughout the world, so to speak. And that's kind of what happened here. Like it became very human. The
Right.
game no longer means anymore,
Right.
because it's all about the in general. So
Right.
I kind of,
I agree with that to a point, Bags, because I don't think it's a Greek mythology thing. I think
well,
that
no,
the
but
NFL,
you understand that
yeah,
I'm being a little facetious with the fact that these guys, I mean, let's face it, these NFL teams and these players are looked at like superheroes, and the teams are looked at and respected and worshipped very similar to they do religion. So,
no,
and I'm putting like, you know, I'm having a very weird road to get from A to B, but it's kind of similar in the way that they do things. I'm not suggesting that a football team is God,
yeah, I know that.
but you understand, like, I'm not saying that, but it is respected and worshipped very similar to religion, and
I
that
think,
these players are
Bags,
superheroes.
I think the NFL showed all the emotions. I think it was right to show the emotions too. I mean, the players didn't want to play, and I don't blame them. I wouldn't want to play either. I mean, they thought he died, so I don't think I would want to play it either. And the broadcasters, I think they should have just cut the broadcast. They shouldn't tried to say, well, we're going to play some more. We'll be right back. The announcers there were they didn't know what to
Well,
say. There was
there's nothing that was ever put into this. Now, there are going to be certain contingencies, very similar to when there's a rain delay. It's almost what should have kind of happened here. They're just not used to having these type of delays in football because they don't stop for the rain. They don't stop for
right.
when there's situations unless there's like lightning in the area. So
And
ultimately, there wasn't that type of stuff put in place to say, hey, if we get a rain delay, we go to this. This would have
But
fallen into that same category.
Mac, they're not going to go to other programming at that moment.
no, what I'm
I
saying,
got to
Jack,
say, as soon as,
I
yeah.
didn't, I didn't say that. What I'm saying is, I think they should have ended the broadcast. I mean, what they were showing was advertisements after the same advertisements over and over again. It made the NFL look greedy. It made them look heartless. I think it would have been better if they just said, "Hey, listen, because of what happened on the field, we're going to stop the broadcast of this game. Maybe they pick up some other sport. I don't know."
Oh, that would have been heartless to go right to another.
I agree, Jack, but I don't know. I don't know. I don't know what
It was
else.
newsworthy, Mac, but the CNN and Fox News picked up the thing with Hamlin. They were on the air. So you can't expect ESPN, their game, to leave the air and let CNN and Fox run the show.
Yeah, and not only that, you have, I mean, now you have, again, you had 30 million people watching, and then the moment that this occurs and it makes it out on social media, you probably have another 20 million people coming on to watch. So now you have 50 million people that are looking for information one way or another. You're not going to be able to
Yeah.
say, okay, we're going to, we're going to show from the week. I mean, they may have been able to do that a little bit different. Be like, listen, while this is unfolding, we're going to give you our halftime show, our halftime episode, where we're going to discuss some of the games and bring it back to the studio while we're worrying about everything that's happening on the field here. We're going to keep you up to date, but we're going to take it away from the field because it's just, you're right. Again, I got to imagine that they were at a loss for things to say, and they didn't want, so they kept going to commercial because these guys are out, really out there without a raft. They're out in the ocean without a raft at this point because there's not much to say. It is somewhat of a grave situation, and they have to fill the, and it's not easy to fill the time. So
Right, and
That's
the
what I'm saying. I'm
announcers
saying they could have gone
didn't know what to
back to a
say either
news.
because they were getting, I think, conflicting information. Like, yeah, we're going to go. The game might get resumed, but it won't get resumed. And so if you're the person on the air, you're just going with the information that somebody's handing you and saying like, this is the latest update. So you're reading the latest update, and right, you're trying to spend time talking about what's happening, but you don't really know what is happening, and that's the difficulty there. And so the easy thing, like, is you cut to commercials, but when you cut to commercials, then it looks like, oh, we're trying to sell ad time.
Monetize. Yeah, but
Yeah,
all they're doing, oh, in fact, they're not actually. It's like all those ads are getting freebies at this point because they don't know what else to do.
right, because they
It's
ran
just
out
like
of things to say and they didn't know what else to say.
they're repeating the same set of commercials because that was the last set of commercials that just were supposed to run. So I got to imagine that they're sending the same set of commercials that they may move to the next set, but then they got to go back to that because if the game does continue, they have to wait for that run to actually hit to be able
No.
to do that. So
Yeah, he does no plan in place during the World Series when there was an earthquake in the World Series between the Giants and the Athletics. Al Michaels had to ad lib, and I thought he did a great job.
He was
Al Michaels.
phenomenal. That was
Yet,
amazing. Yes.
one of these critics on the newspaper criticized Michaels' performance. I mean, but what was he supposed to do? What's he supposed to sit down? Well, if an earthquake takes place, this is what we do, this and that. There's certain circumstances. So in the NFL's in the studio during the game last Monday, they have no idea what to say. Pax said it best. We were all waiting for information. That's what we wanted first and foremost, information. And no information was forthcoming for a couple of reasons. One, the doctors probably didn't have any. Two, you got to respect the family. They can't give us information before they give the family. That would be breaking certain laws. The first thing I did the next morning was go on and look for information and update. I had no idea whether Hamlin died, whether he got better, whether he was the same. But the point is, I wanted information. I still want information how he's doing. It seems like he's turned the corner, and that's
Right.
really good. But I still am waiting for some more positive information. I have my eye out for that. And there was no information to give anyone. So you had them in the studio. And let's be honest, they were just basically going in circles because they had no idea what to say. And I'm not being critical of them. What can they say? They can shake their head, say how sorry they are, how their prayers are with Hamlin and his family. And they could go. There's just so much you can say after a while, yet they're forced to be on the air. And in a way, it's the broadcasters feel a sense of being tortured because internally they're hurting and they just have to move forward in some way. And there's no way to move forward when something like this happens.
Well, I want to change the conversation. We've talked a lot about this, and we did this the same on Thursday, and you guys mentioned it yesterday as well. Do you think he'll play again?
Yeah, I would have no idea. I would think it's unlikely. But I don't know. I'm not a doctor.
I think he will try to come back. I think he'll try and play again. The Redskin running back that got in the car accident, they didn't think he'd walk again, and you see he's having a great year running the ball right now.
You're talking the guy who got shot.
Yeah, and he's playing and he's doing really well. It looks like Hamlin loves the game. He loves playing for Buffalo, and I wouldn't be surprised at all if he's going to try and come back next year. I wouldn't put it past them. So.
And the doctors said that the best case scenario that he would return to pre-hit condition.
Right.
So that means that he would be in playing shape in theory. Again, this was who knows what 1 in 10,000, 1 in 25,000, 1 in maybe it was only 1 in 6. If it's only 1 in 6, then he should never do play again. However, if it's like a 1 in 10,000 hit or a 1 in 20,000 hit, and now that because of this, if it's down to 1 in 8,000 hit, like it breaks it in half, it is enough. Like, at what point do you consider the ramifications of playing again versus playing? This is a game that you love, that you've played the entire life. Now, all of a
Yeah.
sudden, because of this very unique situation, you're not able to play anymore. Maybe. But the doctors may say, hey, listen, there's still a possibility that you could have this same type of situation occur. And then we're tempting fate a second time here. And I don't
Yeah.
know that the second time that we tempt fate is as favorable as the first time we tempted fate. But, how do you tell somebody he can't play anymore if he's physically able to play?
My guess is he's absolutely going to play, from what I've heard. Okay,
Yep.
from what I've heard, if this indeed is a flukish scenario that could have happened to anyone, he just happened to get hit, and it could be 1 in a million, and there's no reason why he shouldn't be back playing if this truly was a fluke and there's no pre-existing condition. So, I mean, who knows? I mean, listen, a lot of times we make judgments based on morality. I was on the board of directors of a medical group in boxing, okay? And there's this fighter heard of, Tommy Morrison, okay? Okay, he was
in a Rocky movie.
He was a noted heavyweight. He held
pretty good heavyweight. Yeah.
Title. But Tommy Morrison, he came down with the HIV virus. He got suspended, his license and all that. And I'm sitting with the doctors during a board meeting, and they're saying, well, they could never license him, this or that. And I'm saying, wait a second, but from what I understand, the chances of his opponent catching it, is less than getting struck by lightning. Is that correct? And I was told, yeah, you could say that's correct. So why isn't he being licensed? Then he's no danger to his opponent. Yet they wouldn't license him because it would look terrible based on moral grounds. A fighter with HIV or AIDS bleeding on his opponent set off such a chain of fear. So they were making a moral issue. But my point is, with Damar Hamlin, people might not want to see him play because they're going to be so scared for him based on morality, not on medical evidence, but based on the morality part of it, that he might be told to retire. He might be urged. The Bills might not want him to play. They might say, look, we'll keep you on the practice squad. No hitting hard. You'll get a paycheck and benefits.
Wasn't Magic Johnson? He had HIV too, right?
Yeah, but that was after he retired.
No, he played. He played.
Great point.
He played. He came back and played. He played forward for, I forget which team while he had HIV. Jack.
He played with the Lakers.
I think he was on the Lakers. Yeah.
Right.
But the thing is, Magic Johnson, as it turned out, wasn't a threat to the other players that transmit the virus based on the medical evidence. Yet players didn't want to play against him. Certain players, they were all apprehensive. Oh no, if he leans on me, I might catch it. That was the mass hysteria. Right.
So
I know. I mean, and that's what. Yeah, I think that this, getting back to what we're talking about, because as we got turned off by hey Tommy, I didn't hear no bell, type of situation. I say that all the time, but I mean, I think that there's a piece of me that believes that he will get back on a football field again. I think that that Hamlin will get back on a football field in a Bills uniform. It may not, like, I suspect that he will be at one of the playoff games. Like that he'll be able to walk onto the field. As of right now, from the last bit of information that I heard, obviously he was talking to his team. He got, thing that he asked when he woke up was, did we win? Did we win the game? You know what I mean? That shows that he still has every bit of his cognitive functions available. Once they extubated him and he was able to talk to everybody, they're saying that his lungs are still healing and they're in the healing process, and that ultimately, my expectation is that if everything is okay, he'll still have to get some tests run, and he probably won't come back this year. But I suspect that you are going to see him get announced from the tunnel, and he is going to come out and wave to everybody. And
I agree.
Bill's jersey and maybe street clothes underneath and stuff like that. I suspect that is going to get celebrated some way, during the
agree.
I could
playoffs,
see
as it
that.
should.
I think it'd be hard to. I mean,
Yeah,
but I'm not a
I'm gonna
physician. I'm not
just
a
say
medical
this.
guy. But to have him
If he
play
ma-
again, that's scary.
If he makes a comeback, he'll be lucky that Mac isn't his coach, because if he doesn't cut it and perform during training camp, Mac would cut him, based on performance.
Yeah. Okay.
I think Mac's
know.
got a bigger heart. But you know what? We're at the top
Mac
of-
is all business when it comes to football and stuff like that. Mac is hardline.
Yes.
Our dear friend Pags has got to go. He's got a charity event that's coming up. So we're going to break to a commercial now. And then we'll be back on the other side. So we'll see you in just a few moments.
Take it easy, Pat.
Supporting the needs of our veterans. That's the goal of all of us at Team AmVets. Like Mitch, Carlos, and Kevin from our Welcome Home team that brings furniture to our vets.
We are Team AmVets.
Or Linda from our thrift stores who brings you great bargains every day.
I am Team AmVets.
And John, who picks up your thrift store donations that support California veterans programs.
I am Team AmVets.
Visit our website or a Team AmVets thrift store to donate or shop today.
Join the team!
Anyone else? Anyone else?
My name is David, and in 8 years, I'll be an alcoholic. I'll start drinking in middle school, just at parties. But my parents won't start talking to me about it till high school. And by then, I'll already be in some trouble.
Kids who drink before age 15 are 5 times more likely to have alcohol problems when they're adults.
The thing is, my parents won't even see it coming.
So start talking.
Who's next?
Before they start drinking.
Hey guys, real quick before Doc puts on another commercial, I just want to let everybody know today we are doing our Delco Dummers Parade. So anybody who's watching and is in the area, please come out and support us. We're going to be doing a parade around Ridley Park, the Delco Dummers, which is it's a mummer style parade. And if you wear your jersey today, any Philadelphia jersey, and with a donation of $10 to the Victory for campaign, you will get your face painted and be part of the Philly Sports Guy Brigade. So please come out and support the Delco Dummers today, and Victory for Vincent. Vincent is going to be our Grand Marshal today. He is a child who's about 4 years old, suffers from a very rare brain disease, and this is to support him and his family in his fight. So I'm going to get it back to Doc here and let him do everything, but please, again, the Delco Dummers.
That's awesome, Pags. So good luck with that whole event. I hope it goes really well.
I appreciate it. Thank you. This is our 3rd year. This is the first time we're doing it, and I have to go get ready as the Philly Sports Guy. The Philly Sports Guy is going to be there. So if you have your kids or if you want to just come out and support, it's going to be a great time today.
What time?
So the party starts at 11. We march at 2.
Nice.
So
and that's at Ridley Park?
It's in Ridley Park at Dolan's Bar. If you know me and follow me, it's in my living room, is what I call it, because that's where I go to watch all the games and such. But it's for a great cause, like I said, Victory for Vincent. If you follow me on Facebook or if you've seen it on Twitter, you should be able to find it and get all of the information. So the party starts at 11. I'll be painting faces at 11, and we march right at 2:00.
That's awesome. Good luck. Hope it's a big success.
Thank you very much. And I'll see you guys all next week, and I'll see Mac and Jack tomorrow.
Yeah, for the football show. Absolutely. All right. We'll do a couple more promos, and then we'll get Mac and Jack back here. You have a great day, Pags. We'll see you next week.
Thanks. Take care.
I mean, you can see right now, without LeBron, Lakers are struggling.
Let me tell you about a team I hate, all right? I know the Dallas Cowboys fan is here, so I had to make sure he knew how much I hate this team.
I'm ready.
I've often said that the people who run baseball, they try very hard to ruin it.
I'm from Brooklyn. I don't have a problem saying it to his face. Oh, from Brooklyn. Hey, isn't he?
Trisha's having a sleepover tonight. Can I go?
I wonder about Lucy's friends. What should I say? I know you're only 10, but one of these days a friend will offer you a drink. And alcohol at your age can lead to so many things. None of them good.
So can I go to the sleepover?
Lucy, I want you to promise me
I
something.
finished my homework.
Bigger promise. If there's any drinking, I want you to say, "No thanks, not my thing."
Mom.
I promise you, your real friends won't care. Deal?
Sure.
Really?
I promise, Mom.
They really do hear you.
Did you pack your toothbrush?
For tips on how to start the talk, visit underagedrinking.samhsa.gov. A public service message from the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration.
All right, it looks like we're just about ready to come back. We've got Jack and we've got Mac coming in just in a moment. Pags, of course, also going off to that great fundraising event. Go to his Facebook page and learn more about it. Ridley Park to raise money for a child in need. You know, this is what it's all about. We spent the first hour of the show talking about, you know, a tragic situation happened in the NFL. And the idea is we're going to spend time. Pags is now going to spend time trying to help other people in his community as well. And so that's noble and great and wonderful. And now Mac is back, so we're all here, and we've got another hour of debating to go. So let's jump right into it. We spent an hour on the first question. That was amazing. We're going to talk about postseason awards now, and the idea that postseason awards are given out after the season, but the awards are really based on the regular season and they don't take into account any postseason games. Is that right? Should the awards also include what happens in the postseason, in the playoffs, the World Series, Super Bowl, NHL Finals, etc.? What do you think?
Mac?
Yeah, listen, I think they're two separate seasons, right? You have the regular season to where you finish at the end of the season, and then you got the postseason. So, I mean, that's the way it's set up. I think that's the way it's always been set up. I think all sports basically do the same thing, that, you reward the people like they rewarded him for having a great regular season. And of course, he didn't play too well in the postseason, so he didn't get awards for that. So I think that's the right way it should be. And it should be that way going forward.
I agree. What do you think, Jack?
I disagree with both of you. It absolutely should be the postseason. You especially, Doc, should know that. And you especially am I taking to task more so than Mac. Aren't you the one who complained about Brian Cashman's performance because the Yankees have not been to a World Series since 2009?
Yes.
Well, if you forget the postseason, hasn't Brian Cashman been magnificent?
Yeah, I've said that.
Magnificent GM. If you just look at his work, the bottom line is we remember the postseason. That's what we take away. The Yankees collapsed against the Red Sox in 2004. No one cares that they won the division. I think they also won it in 2007 when the Red Sox beat them out, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe I am. But the point is, a team can win the division every year. They fold up in the postseason. We hold it against them. Players too. I mean, it's the whole season from beginning to end. The season doesn't end when the regular season ends in the postseason.
Yeah, it does. You just said it. Regular season.
Yeah.
Regular, but the baseball season, the football season, the basketball season ends when the team is eliminated from the playoffs.
All right, so 2 years ago, Shohei Ohtani had an amazing season. He pitched and he hit and he did all sorts of great things. The Angels didn't make the playoffs, so he shouldn't have been the MVP?
MVP is what you've meant to your team. I forgot who's the line, but GMs use the line sometimes. They tell a player, I came in last place with you. I could come in last place without you. That's the line to me with Ohtani. his value to the Angels at the box office was tremendous. If you want to consider those other factors, what he meant to the franchise as a face to the franchise, I can understand that argument, and I'll listen and I'll talk about that. But his value in wins and losses were very minimal. They really were. The Angels weren't good. They didn't come close to making the playoffs. So how valuable could he be? Like when A-Rod had that great year at Texas, they were last place. How do you give him in the MVP?
Andre Dawson won an MVP with the Cubs. I think Ernie Banks.
It's not best play. It's most valuable.
That's Jack, your definition. It doesn't.
Jack, let me ask Jack a question. You think Brian DeBall deserves Coach of the Year this year?
If you're talking regular season,
yes. Do you think he deserves?
Wait 1 second. If the Jacksonville Jaguars win tomorrow, they're going to make the playoffs, meaning they would have won their division. They would have ended the season with 5 straight wins. Trevor Lawrence has now gotten developed under Doug Peterson as an elite quarterback this year. They've taken a big jump. I've got to sit down. I got to compare DeBall and Doug Peterson.
Well, let's just for argument's sake, Jack. Do you think that Brian DeBall deserves to be Coach of the Year this year?
I thought I answered your question saying in the sense I can't give you a name. I have to compare to Doug Peterson. That the Jacksonville Jaguars still got a game. I'm going to go a step further. If they win if they get to the Super Bowl, absolutely.
So suppose
if they get to the Super Bowl.
All right. So suppose all that happens and the Giants say they just win a playoff game. They win the playoff game and then they lose the following game. Do you think they should hold that against DeBall, the loss in the playoffs when he coached excellent during the year with nothing?
He would have won a playoff game. You said if they win a playoff game.
Yeah, but they lose.
You know what I'm going to look with DeBall? A coach that got off to a 6-1 start. You know what his record has been since being 6-1? 3-5-1.
Right.
If I want to look at it that way, he hasn't been exactly Coach of the Year candidate for a good half of the season.
All right.
Let's see how they finish up. They play the Eagles tomorrow. If they lose to the Eagles tomorrow, and it's not an important game for them, and they lose in the first round of the playoffs, I got to look at the other candidates. I mean,
all right. So let's talk about one of your favorite coaches, Tomlin, right? For the Steelers. The Steelers say they win out, they're 9-8, but they lose their first playoff game. Do you hold that against Tomlin?
Well, Tomlin wouldn't be my Coach of the Year as much as I revere him. Okay, but I will say this: what happens if the Steelers win tomorrow, make the playoffs, and they go to the Super Bowl? I've got to seriously consider Tomlin as Coach of the Year. The way he kept it together, a floundering team, and they do that. I mean, Brian DeBall, there's a reasonable chance I would vote for him, yes, but I want to see the playoffs run their course. Let's say the Jacksonville Jaguars win the Super Bowl. Okay, let's say under Doug Peterson, and the Giants get eliminated the first game of the playoffs. Are you going to tell me Brian DeBall deserves Coach of the Year over Doug Peterson?
For the regular season, yes.
But the regular season would have been so close when you think of it. Jacksonville, when they had the number 1 pick in the draft last year, meaning they were the worst team, and now they get a new coach and he takes them, to the playoffs, and maybe they make a run at the Super Bowl. I mean, it's a matter of opinion. But Brian DeBall, on balance, has done a heck of a job on balance. Yeah, but I want to see the season run its course.
All right, so Aaron Judge was great this year, right? Got the Yankees to the playoffs. He's had one of the most remarkable seasons ever. He did terribly in the playoffs. So let's say the Yankees won the games, because that's not unheard of that one player could do poorly and you win. And let's say the Yankees made it all the way to the World Series and won the World Series, but in the World Series, he did poorly again. Let's say throughout the whole playoffs, he hit .072 with 1 homer and 4 RBIs. but he had the great regular season. But he was not great. And he's not the reason the Yankees won any playoff games or the World Series. Is he still the MVP? Or did he give the MVP to Brian Doyle or something like that for the whole season because he was great in the playoffs?
No, I mean, the playoffs are one little part of it. Look, getting back, you mentioned Ohtani. Let's say the Angels got into the playoffs. Judge still would have been my MVP based on the regular season, even if the Angels had gotten into the playoffs, because Judge had one of these off-the-chart type years that are extremely rare. But let's say they were both teams in the playoffs, and the playoffs turned out as they were. Judge didn't do well in the playoffs, and Ohtani was sensational in the playoffs and took the Angels to the World Series. There's a good chance Ohtani winds up edging Judge out, pulling ahead of him and getting my vote because of the value he may have shown as a two-way player, propelling his team, let's say, into the World Series, something Judge couldn't do.
Okay, so you're going to say that certain awards or all awards should be based on the postseason. So let's say
the whole year, beginning to end.
Right. Okay, so Adley Rutschman was a great rookie. He didn't win Rookie of the Year, but I think he might have been the runner-up or whatever. He played great for the Orioles. The Orioles did not make the playoffs, obviously. The Yankees obviously didn't really have any great rookies. I guess Cabrera would have been the best rookie they had, but he had the opportunity to play in the playoffs, so he got more games, so he gets more opportunities to win the award, because how can you give it to Adley Rutschman? How could you be the Rookie of the Year if your team didn't win? Right. I'm trying to understand, but some awards you can end at the right end of the regular season, but other awards you have to continue through the playoffs.
Yeah, you have to be comparable. You can't have a very average regular season and the other guy has a great regular season, and just because you catch fire during the playoffs, you can't go ahead of him based just on the playoffs. You've got to be reasonably close. Judge deserved, for example, an MVP of Ohtani, but it wasn't lopsided per se. Had it been in the playoffs. But if one rookie, what was he? Miguel Andujar finished in second place. I think
like 2017 or
right. I forgot who came in ahead of him that year.
I don't either. I to be honest, I don't really keep track.
Right, but had the Yankees made a big playoff push with Andujar that year, and he was a World Series MVP, whoever beat him out, I would think Andujar I would put him ahead of at that point.
Arturo Gotti and Mickey Ward, help me know, tell me if I'm correct here, a couple of times had what was considered the fight of the year. Isn't that correct?
Correct.
All right. Were they always championship fights?
Actually, no. No, they weren't championship fights.
Correct. That's my memory. So
yeah.
How could you say it was the fight of the year if it wasn't for a championship? If the championships are what defines in the end who gets the award.
That's a good point.
Well, first off, championships in boxing are a joke. Okay,
that's a fair comment.
I don't. People, you want to know something? You want good fights. You want to know something? The second Muhammad Ali Joe Frazier fight, there was no world championship at stake. People forget that, and no one cared. People want good fights. These silly titles. And Gatti Ward, you mentioned a great point. No one thinks about it. Gatti Ward wasn't for any world championships. It was Gatti and Ward. That was the world championship. The two names, Gatti and Ward.
Well, that's my point. I'm saying sometimes there's things that are more than the playoffs. I think sometimes I remember Mike and the Mad Dog used to rant and rave like, "What's he done in the playoffs? What's he done in the playoffs?" Like, the Yankees weren't making the playoffs back then. That didn't take away from Don Mattingly being a great player and saying like he still deserved and he was still the best player in the league at certain times. And I think that happens all the time. There's somebody who's the best player in the league. You judge it on the only thing that's equal for every team is the fact that they all play a certain amount of games, 162 games or 17 games in the NFL or whatever it is. That's the season. That's what we judge it on. Then the second season is the playoffs, and they give awards for the playoffs. There's a World Series MVP and a Championship Series MVP. Those players win those awards. They're different. They're two separate seasons.
No. Let me throw something at Mac. Mac knows more about quarterbacks than both of us here. If I told you, Mac, the greatest quarterback of all time is Dan Marino, and I want to base it on the regular season, I'll say, look what he did in the regular season. No one thinks of Dan Marino on the short list. When I say short list, top 3 or 4 greatest quarterbacks of all time, because he never won a Super Bowl. They only went to 1. But if I tell you Dan Marino's actually better than Tom Brady, actually better than Peyton Manning, and I want to, and we don't count the postseason at all, I've got an argument suddenly, but we got to count the postseason.
Well, I think that's why you have the separate awards, Jack. Right? I mean, that's why, Dan Marino was, I'm not sure if he was Rookie of the Year or not his first year. I think he was during the regular season. He went to the Super Bowl, lost that one Super Bowl against the 49ers, to Joe Montana, which wasn't, I don't think that was a terrible loss, but I think he was Rookie of the Year that year. And that's why we have the argument for separate awards for 2 different seasons. I think you're making my point. You can't give somebody an award, a year at the end of the year award, when Aaron Judge goes 0 for whatever in the playoffs. You can't give him an award for the playoffs when he didn't play well. I don't know how you do that.
That has to count in his body of work, but Judge did enough, and he had enough of a cushion. He had such a large cushion, he could afford to absorb a bad postseason and still get the award. But if things were close with Judge, I think you really have to seriously consider what went on in the postseason before voting him the MVP.
Yeah, I agree.
I think they're 2 separate seasons. So
well, that's what it is right now.
I like it that way, and I think it should be that way. Speaking of awards in baseball, they give this might be a quicker question for us, but they give awards for the American League and the National League. They don't give awards for just baseball, but in football, they definitely do. They give an NFL MVP rather than an AFC or an NFC MVP. In baseball, should they get rid of awards by league? So I'll jump in right here and say, no, the American League is the American League. The National League is the National League. They are intermingling them more and more. Every team's going to play each other this coming year. I'm not necessarily thrilled with the idea. I don't like it when baseball continues to just try to find gimmicks and things like that to try to create more interest in the sport. Just play a great game. You don't have to worry about gimmicks. But no, the American League's the American League. The National League's the National League. And why not have an award for the National League MVP and the American League MVP? Why should there only be one? That's my thought.
Let me say, guys, how come the NBA has only one award, one MVP? The NFL has only one MVP, but baseball splits it up into 2 MVPs, 2 Cy Young Award winners. And I think, Doc, the incriminating part about your argument is interleague play. It's not as meaningful American and National League anymore. They used to have a great identity. I was an American League fan. I took a lot of pride in my league. When the All-Star game would come along, the worst part about my youth was the American League losing year after year after year. Every year I couldn't wait for a breakthrough. And then as like an adult now, the American League seems to be winning just about every year, but who cares?
Nobody
anymore?
cares about the All-Star game
No one
anymore.
cares American League pride against National League pride. Even the players cared back in the day. They wanted to beat one another. There was pride of league, American League against National League. Pete Rose would run into Ray Fosse. That's how much they wanted to win the game. That wouldn't happen today. One player wouldn't run into another during a game like that. It's, I think one for all of baseball. That has more value. I want to see one MVP in all of baseball, one Cy Young Award winner in baseball, one Rookie of the Year all in baseball. Like, you're cutting the pie in half. Why is baseball the only sport, major sport, to cut the pie right in half?
Because they've been doing it forever.
So
now
that's
not an excuse. I'm not a big believer, and that's the way we've always done it. But baseball was giving awards to the American League and National League before these other sports were even major sports. It's the other sport. It's not that why is baseball doing it differently, or why don't they do what the other sports do? The other sports came after baseball, and after baseball is already awarding its awards in two different leagues. That's the history of where the awards came from.
Don't they have awards for multiple things already anyway? Can't you be a Cy Young Award winner and a Most Valuable Player Award winner in the same year? I mean, can't you in football they do have different awards. I mean, you do have the NFC Defensive Player of the Year and the AFC Player of the Year. It is divided somewhat. It's not just one award per division. Also in football, I mean, there are different awards. You do have the MVP, but you also got the AFC Player of the Year award or the NFC Player of the Year.
You have one MVP. You don't have like one MVP overall. It was Aaron Rodgers the last 2 years. You won't get it this year in football. Right. But baseball is going to have two. They're going to have an American.
I think you just made the point. So let's and with the other point also. So let's say Aaron Rodgers, the Packers, everybody wrote them off weeks ago, right? They were done. They were not going to make the playoffs. And Aaron Rodgers was going to be a Jet next year, yada, 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 blah, blah, blah. So let's say the Aaron Rodgers throws for 450 yards today and the Packers make the playoffs. And then he throws for 400 yards each round of the playoffs, and the Packers end up winning the Super Bowl. Was he the MVP of the NFL this year?
I doubt it, no matter what he does. Let's say he's phenomenal the next few games, and they win the Super Bowl. Considering all the turmoil that went on a good part of the season, them being in a very bad place, I can't see voting for him unless everyone else eliminated themselves. Let's say Jalen Hurts, who was a candidate, has a 4-interception game and absolutely is horrendous during the playoffs. And let's say a Patrick Mahomes, is awful as well. I'm just giving an example, but I can't see any scenario logically that Aaron Rodgers, he could play the next few games, the games of his life, where I could actually give it to him.
But his team made it to the playoffs and he won the Super Bowl.
No, it doesn't mean the team that wins it, the guy should be most valuable player.
Doesn't that mean, but by the definition of valuable?
My definition is this. Let's say the Baltimore Orioles had a great player that elevated and carried the team to where they were last year. And that wasn't the case as far as I could see. But they didn't make the playoffs, but they finished over 500 and they contended. That to me is a lot of value. Wow, they wouldn't have contended. They would have been a doormat team if it wasn't for this player. That's my definition of value, most valuable. That's why I'm not a fan of Ohtani getting this award. He's not valuable to his team as far as winning and losing through no fault of his. He just hasn't elevated them. It's not called Best Player Award. That's what I always argue about.
Right. But that's an argument that's come out in the last 10, 15, 20, 30 years. This idea that valuable means you have to win. Value. Yeah. I don't think when the award was first given out that's what they were talking about. They were saying like, this is the most valuable player. He's the best player. I think that's where the heart of the award came from. And then people started to look at the word value. But if we're going to look at value, and you said this before too, and then we'll move on to a question about the Jets. But if the question is value wins or is value money? And if Ohtani brings more value to the California Angels franchise because when he plays, he puts more people in the seat. Doesn't then that make him the most valuable player because he's the one? And if we're going to start to look at it like in that type of sense, then don't you have to consider how much money the team makes extra when he plays minus what his salary is to be the real? I mean, it just gets silly. I think it's really the best player.
You make a great point, and I would. If that's criteria, money making the franchise, increasing the value of the franchise, as much as I'd hate to do it, I might vote for Ohtani 7 years in a row, regardless of his stats, if he's elevating the value of the franchise way above any other player.
Yeah,
right. So I think the heart is. I'm sorry, Mac. I think the heart is it's the best player, and they just use the word
Call
value.
it the best player, then change the terminology.
They've been trying to do that for years, Jack.
They can do it easily. Come on. They change names of teams when they want to. They do it very quickly. Just change the terminology. And that's
in fact, today the show is called the Jack and Mac Show. We just did it. It just changed it.
There you go. There you are.
All right. So the Jets, I was a Jets fan. They were the first team I really loved when I started watching football in the early 80s. Freeman McNeil and Richard Todd and the New York Sack Exchange. We've gone through this a million times. But the Jets have this way of breaking the fans' heart year after year after year. I'll never forget. I think it was my freshman year of college. Kenny O'Brien was the quarterback. They started the year, I think 7 or 8-1, and then they lost every game the rest of the year. And I think they played the Chiefs in the playoffs.
Yeah, they were 10-1, and they lost their last 5 regular season games.
Crazy.
They did beat the Chiefs that playoff game.
Oh, did they beat? But whatever. It's like,
and then they lost. And then they lost the next week. They had a 10-point lead against Cleveland with 4 minutes to go, and they held Cleveland. But Mark Gastineau roughed the passer. So instead of Cleveland punting to the Jets deep in their own territory, they got a first down, and the rest is history.
And then of course, I gravitated in those to the Washington Redskins and John Riggins and all that, and that was fun. But the Jets, they just have this terrible, unbelievable bad luck. And their quarterback, they drafted him in the second, number 2 player overall a couple of years ago, Zach Wilson, and he's been terrible. And so who's to blame? Is it the coaching staff's fault? Is Zach Wilson just not a good quarterback? Was it a bad pick? What do you think? You guys are the football experts much more than me. Whose fault is it that Zach Wilson has just become a disaster?
Go ahead, Jack. It's your team. You can.
Yeah, I don't think he's such a disaster. I think the coaching has been a disaster, how they've handled him. Keep this in mind. Until he had that terrible game against New England, they had been winning games with Zach Wilson starting. Now you could say it's the defense, it's the special teams, it's the running backs, it's the receivers. Regardless, they were winning games. He's got to play a lot. Number 2 overall pick, you've got to see what you have long term. You're going to get some bad games. Before, Mac mentioned like coach of the year, and I gave the example of Doug Peterson with Trevor Lawrence. Trevor Lawrence was pretty dreadful as a rookie last year. Big disappointment. This year, he started the year as a disappointment, but eventually he's getting it together, and now he's showing he's a good quarterback who might be an elite quarterback. He might turn out at some point to be on a par with the best quarterbacks in the NFL. He's trending in that direction, actually. Zach Wilson's got to play. Listen, if Zach Wilson is playing poorly, you have a team that has a chance to make the playoffs. You play the guy who gives you your best chance to win. I can kind of understand that. But you don't put Zach Wilson in street clothes. Let him be a backup. Let him be in uniform. You don't tear him down the way he is and then say, oh, we're going to get it right with him. Look, with the Giants, with Eli Manning, the Giants had Kurt Warner as a quarterback, an established, quarterback who turned out to be a Hall of Fame quarterback. I believe he's in the Hall of Fame, if I'm not mistaken.
He is, yeah, absolutely.
Right. But when Eli Manning first took over as Giant quarterback, he took over for Kurt Warner when Kurt Warner was playing well. That's the ironic thing. And Eli Manning didn't play well. the rest of the year, the second half of the year. He struggled, but there was patience with him. Eventually, Eli Manning became a pretty good quarterback. Someone mentioned on yesterday's show, Phil Simms' NFL career got off to a real slow start the first few years. You've got to be patient. You got to keep working with Zach Wilson. But by taking him out of uniform, when is he going to learn? How is he going to learn? I don't want to hear Zach's got to get away from football. He's got to reset. If he's that fragile, get rid of him now. But the coaching staff, I believe, this has been a terrible job of handling Zach Wilson.
Zach? Oh, go on, Mac.
I think the coaching staff has done a real good job as far as building the team and changing the changing the character of the team on the field and the way they practice. I think their defense is lights out this year. I think their running game has improved a lot. I think Zach Wilson is not a mistake made. The Jets aren't, the head coaches aren't the ones that drafted Zach Wilson. That was done by management. So I think they put them in a very bad situation by drafting Zach Wilson instead of maybe going with Justin Fields or one of the other young quarterbacks that were there that could have maybe, carried the Jets. I mean, if you had Justin Fields right now, he'd probably be playing, and the Jets would have a shot at the playoffs right now. Zach Wilson isn't that type of a quarterback. So I don't really blame the Jets staff, the coaching staff. They are trying to deal with the hand they were dealt. Zach Wilson will be back next year. They've already said that. He is going to be there. I don't know what they're going to do. Joe Flacco's starting today. I don't know. I don't know what the Jets are thinking sometimes. I mean, they should have already picked up somebody from a practice squad or something. They've tried.
Well, the year's over. It's one game, Mac Flacco. Who cares? They win tomorrow. They're 8-9 and on the playoffs.
I think the Jet fans care, Jack. I think the Jet fans care to see that the team is trying to do something in a good way.
Okay,
I mean,
Matt, let me ask you this. Zach Wilson, they're taking him out of uniform. The game's in Miami. He doesn't have to play in front of his fans. The Jets are out of the playoffs, so
right.
I hate that they can afford to lose. This is a game you play Zach Wilson. And if Zach Wilson had a good game, let's say he had a good game tomorrow against Miami, doesn't that change the mindset a little bit going into next year? It gives Zach Wilson that extra boost of confidence, and it gives the Jet fan base a little more confidence in him. They say, hey, Zach Wilson had a good last game. He threw 3 touchdown passes. He's showing that maybe he's fulfilling his potential.
It might. It might, Jack. You might be right. I'd play him. I mean, I sure wouldn't play Flacco, that's for sure. I definitely would play Zach Wilson and
over Flacco, at least.
Oh, yeah.
That's a coaching mistake. So you're, in a way, blaming the coaching staff for that one move, at least.
Right. I am. I definitely am. I think Zach Wilson has a chance to become a good quarterback. I don't think he's going to be a Hall of Famer or a trendsetter or nothing like that. I think Zach Wilson can be a very good quarterback in the NFL. And I think the Jets would be crazy to get rid of him right now.
I think sometimes a player needs a new start, a fresh start, and a new place. And Zach Wilson, it was a disaster this year. You're a starting quarterback. You're in street clothes. You're back in street clothes. I mean, it's just the organization has not done a good job with him, whether that's the coach, the upper management, or whatever. I think when he was drafted, a lot of people were surprised that he was the guy the Jets picked. There was he played for a less than stellar powerhouse type of football program. And then he hasn't really performed with the Jets. He hasn't been great. And I think he lost the locker room. I think that's what really happened is the fact that the players weren't happy playing behind him. And if you have a quarterback and he doesn't have the respect of the rest of the team, I think it's hard to lead a team. And for the Jets' sake, if I'm a Jets fan and I'm only a fair weather Jets fan, the only time I'll even put them on is if I think they have a chance to maybe make the playoffs for the most part. if I'm a Jets fan and Zach Wilson's my starting quarterback next year, I'm not excited at all. I think the Jets need to do something to say, look, we are close to winning. Mac had mentioned it before. The defense was really pretty darn good this year. They're probably a quarterback away from being a team that could have made the playoffs. And if I'm the Jets, you got to go out and get somebody who is a quality quarterback. We've seen Sam Darnold and Mark Sanchez and Zach Wilson, all these guys that are going to be the next great quarterback, and none of them ever are. I think you need to bring somebody in who everybody knows is a quality quarterback. I don't know much about Derek Carr, but I've been reading a lot about him. He's been successful. At least you know he can quarterback a team. And then you say to your team, your fan base, we're bringing in a player who's going to help us win, at least not help us lose. And I think, unfortunately, Zach Wilson's tenure with the Jets he's been a guy who's helped them lose. And maybe he can be a good quarterback, but I don't think he'd be a good quarterback with the Jets. And I don't think he'd get a fair shot anyway from the fan base if they start the year with them next year. Am I off base on all that?
It's just my opinion. Mac might disagree on Derek Carr. There's a reason the Las Vegas Raiders are shutting him down, have shut him down the last game and the last couple of games he's out of uniform, because they're looking to move on from him. He didn't get it done with the Raiders, and they got him Devontae Adams, his college wide receiver from the Packers, one of the best receivers in football, and that didn't work out in the long run, with Derek Carr. So
so take away my Derek Carr thing. I just, because I've been reading some about
Lamar Jackson, and now you're talking if the Jets sign him.
Don't take away Derek Carr, Doc, because he is a very good quarterback.
Okay.
But there are a lot of quarterbacks I think that could go in there and do better than Zach Wilson, of course. Jimmy Garoppolo you could throw in there. You could even throw in a couple of older vets that have been around for a while.
You got Jimmy Garoppolo here.
Yeah, I think there's a couple few that could have made a real big impact on the Jets this year, just because they have the experience that Zach Wilson doesn't have. But maybe you're right. Maybe Zach Wilson needs to leave New York. But if he leaves New York, then, I mean, where's he going to play doesn't have pressure? I mean, you even go to a small market team and there's pressure to win. I mean, even if you go, do you send them to New Orleans? Where do you send this kid?
I'm just saying you send him to a place where it's a fresh start, gets a new chance to work with a different coaching staff, but a different bunch of players, right? Yeah. Am I wrong in suspecting that he lost the locker room? That was what happened?
We don't know for sure what goes on in the locker room. I would suspect that maybe you're right, and I agree with you, Doc. At this point, a fresh start. I think this has nothing to do with the pressure playing in New York. That different personalities adapt to things much differently. I remember Archie Manning Sr. talking about his sons, Peyton and Eli. Peyton Manning was supposed to be a Jet. They were going to draft him that year. He stayed in college an extra year. Archie Manning Sr. said Peyton would have been terrible for New York. He would have taken all the criticism to heart. He says, but with Eli, he'll let it all roll off. It wouldn't bother him at all. And look at the way it played out. Eli, none of the criticism got to him at all. You don't know, the personality. You know who I think the pressure's on, guys? The Jet organization. Because if they just cut ties with Zach Wilson, he goes elsewhere and he turns into a tremendous quarterback, and the other coaching staff develops him. And the Jets are struggling at the quarterback position. Can they ever live that down if Zach Wilson is lights out elsewhere? So they're kind of apprehensive to let him go for that reason.
I think you have to make the right choice at the time, and then you can then just say, logically, we made the right choice at the time. Zach Wilson was coming off a bad year. Mac just mentioned Lamar Jackson. We had a chance to get Lamar Jackson. We didn't want Zach Wilson here to be a distraction. Mike White's a fine backup, whatever. And so we had to make the critical decision that what we needed in 2023 was a top quarterback. We got that top quarterback, and we didn't want anything to be distracting from that top quarterback. And we also didn't want to make Zach Wilson a guy who holds a clipboard for 4 years. So we made the decision that was best for Zach and best for the organization at the time, and we let him go. And the results were what the results are.
If you can get a Lamar Jackson, the closest case scenario would have been when Tim Tebow became a folk hero with the Denver Broncos. when they got Peyton Manning, the Broncos, no one could complain when the Broncos then cut Tim Tebow. They let him go because at that point, look, they got the great Peyton Manning. Who's going to say, oh, I want Tebow? They didn't have any room for Tebow anymore. But to just have brought in anyone else at that time after the magical year Tebow had, the fan base would have been, a little uneasy with that. So
the only problem with Lamar Jackson is he gets hurt a lot. And if you bring on Lamar Jackson and he gets hurt, then where do you go after that? Then you're
Mike
right back
White in as your backup.
you're back to the same spot you ended up
White
in.
is your backup, and that's what all teams do. Have a competent backup and take it from there.
It's a revolving door up there in New York.
Zach Wilson, listen, he's still under the rookie contract. If you bring in Lamar Jackson, I'm okay. Zach Wilson is your backup going forward for the time being. And if Lamar Jackson gets hurt, you have a chance. You're rehabilitating Zach Wilson. See what he could do.
Oh.
But Doc is right. Zach Wilson needs a fresh start somewhere for his own good.
If you bring in, remember the movie Cool Hand Luke? There's that great scene in that movie with Paul Newman and George Kennedy, and everybody disliked Paul Newman. As I'm recalling the character Cool Hand Luke, and he fights George Kennedy, and this is in this jail in the Deep South, and no matter what George Kennedy does, Paul Newman gets up again, and George Kennedy punches him, and he gets up again, and he shows like he's a tough guy, and he's got all this masculinity or whatever like that. If he is on the team next year and Zach Wilson is the backup and he goes out there and he just shows that I am in this thing and nothing's going to stop me and I'm going to outwork everybody and be as dedicated to the team as I possibly can. And if he does that, he could win back the locker room. Absolutely, positively. My sense is that's not what was happening. And so Robert Saleh said it's a distraction. We'll move him out and let's try to win some games because we might be able to make the playoffs for the first time in 112 years or something like that. So let's go to the Giants real quick. We're approaching the final 15 or 18 minutes or so. If you're the Giants and you can only pick keeping Daniel Jones or Saquon Barkley, if you had to choose, who do you take?
Well, I'm going to say in most cases, you always go with the quarterback. You do. I mean, it's harder to get a franchise quarterback. Daniel Jones has had a good year. I'm comfortable with sticking with Daniel Jones as the Giant quarterback next year, the year after. I mean, but Saquon Barkley's a special player. Daniel Jones isn't a special player. He's just another guy. Daniel Jones is like a stopgap quarterback who you could stick with a while. Let him keep doing what he's doing. Saquon Barkley is a rare player.
Daniel Jones is a stopgap. Wait a minute. Daniel Jones is a stopgap quarterback.
I'm going to give you an example.
Wait a minute. I want you to explain this. Daniel Jones is a stopgap quarterback. Where is that? Where do you see that?
I'm going to give you an example.
All right.
There's a game today that what the Tennessee Titans are playing. The Tennessee Titans have a good quarterback. He's out injured, Ryan Tannehill. Good quarterback. Like Daniel Jones is a good quarterback, you could say. But if you have a choice in their primes between Ryan Tannehill and Derrick Henry, the Titan running back, you can only have one. You keep Derrick Henry because he's the offense, basically. Ryan Tannehill is basically a decent quarterback, but another guy, he's more replaceable. You can't replace a Derrick Henry. It's so hard to replace a Derrick Henry, even though I know the Titans won when he was out last year during the regular season. But the same thing with Saquon Barkley. You take him away from Daniel Jones. Daniel Jones isn't the same quarterback. His performances go down dramatically without Saquon Barkley. But Saquon Barkley performs at an elite level with or without Daniel Jones. And the Giant offense
Let me ask you something.
comes at a higher level with Saquon Barkley.
Let me ask you something. Let me ask you something. So you say Daniel Jones is a stopgap quarterback, yet he is in the top 10 rated this year. He has the best QBR rating this year of all quarterbacks. He has thrown for over 3,200 yards, is going to rush for almost 700 yards this year, Jack. He has no wide receiver of any relevance, including Saquon Barkley. He's the leader of this team that has gone on this run that the Giants have finally made the playoffs, I think, for the first time in 6 years. His offensive line is finally starting to get better. He's been sacked over 55 times this year. And the Giants are in the playoffs.
And I'm going to say something. You made a great point, Mac.
Right.
Your great point is this.
So go ahead.
Let me narrow down your point. You said first time 6 years. It's the first time the Giants are in the playoffs. In the 4 years Daniel Jones has been there, and he's been the starter for the 4 years. It's called body of work. Look at his body of work. You're looking at this year, and he's dazzling you this year. It's like you would give these guys, Mac, on their free agent year in any sport. They have a great year. Oh, give them the money. Give them the contract. I'm looking at his body of work. If he has done it, if he did what he did this year, the last couple of years, at least one other year, I'm more sold on him. The reason he's had in large part such a good year is because of Saquon Barkley.
Who has been his coach for the last 4 years, Jack?
I know Brian Daboll is his coach this year. So who has been
the coach for the Giants for the last 4 years? Name the coach.
Joe Judge before this.
Joe Judge, right? Who else?
Right. Oh boy. From the offensive. Oh, I'm having a brain cramp. Right.
The point is, there's been a million of them.
Right. There has been. It's been a revolving door. The Giants have had a revolving door of coaches, but yet Daniel Jones still succeeds this year. His first year under Brian Daboll.
Okay, so Brian Daboll isn't that good a coach. He should get coach of the year because of Daniel Jones. I think Brian
Daboll is an excellent coach, but I also think Daniel Jones has proved himself this year, Jack. He has proven himself. He has been the leader of a team with no wide receivers, without an offensive line for most of the year. He's in the top 3 quarterbacks as far as running and throwing the ball, and he's in the class with Josh Allen and Jalen Hurts.
Are you kidding? He's not anyway.
I am telling you the statistics for this year, Jack. I'm not making this up.
I'll tell you another stat. If they lose to the Eagles, they would have finished the year 3-6-1 in their last 10 games.
But they're not.
That is buyer beware.
Let me change the question a little bit. You guys are much bigger football fans than I. So let me just, then I'm going to say something that for me is, you're not going to believe what I'm going to say, but hopefully we have time for me to make the point. But teams, in order to win, and I think the Jets are a perfect example of this over the course of their history, you need to have a good quarterback. You need to have somebody who can run the offense. And I think we've seen this year that Daniel Jones can run the offense. So correct me if I'm wrong. You can win without a great running back, but you can't win without a quality quarterback. Am I correct about that?
Yes.
But what makes a quality quarterback are the people around him. Saquon Barkley has made Daniel Jones into a quality quarterback. When you have a weapon like that.
Just Saquon Barkley, Jack?
Well, Saquon Barkley in large part. I mean, well, okay. You said before Brian Daboll got there, you see now that he has the coach. When Saquon Barkley was injured and out last year, Daniel Jones, what was he? What was he without Saquon Barkley? But when Saquon Barkley's in the lineup, this is like a new Daniel Jones.
Well, there's a whole new team, really, Jack. I mean, you've got a new defensive coordinator, you've got a new offensive coach, you've got a revamped offensive line, you've got you have a healthy Saquon Barkley, and you have Daniel Jones that is leading a team from last year that was only 4-10 to the playoffs this year, Jack.
Thank you, Saquon Barkley, but I want Daniel Jones to be my quarterback.
Yes, you do.
Yeah, and I'm willing to.
He's not playing for the Jets.
Up to it. No, I don't want him there. I want. Listen, the next couple of years, I would sign him to a 2-year deal. Elite quarterback money, we're talking about $40 million. I would give Daniel Jones like a base $20 million base contract with incentives where he could really go up if he needs.
Sure. Those. I mean that's why you're not a GM for the Giants, Jack. That's why.
Yeah, and I see how successful the Giants GMs have been. Yeah, I know. I'm not one.
This year.
All right. So let me say the thing that you're not going to believe is coming out of my mouth. John Riggins is a Hall of Fame running back, my favorite player of all time, obviously. Joe Theismann is not a Hall of Fame quarterback. If you had to choose, if you were running the Redskins back then in the early 80s between Riggins or Theismann, I think, now correct me if I'm wrong, I think as much as I love John Riggins, I think you have to take Joe Theismann because he's the guy who runs the offense. He's the quarterback. But the better of the two players, according to the history of the NFL, is one's a Hall of Famer and the other isn't. So I think the same thing applies here with Saquon Barkley and Daniel Jones. You got to keep the quarterback. He can run the offense. That's the guy you got to keep.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. Theismann was better than Daniel Jones. There's a difference involved there. Okay, Theismann was a very good quarterback.
We don't know yet. Yeah, we don't know that yet. I mean, Daniel Jones.
I want Daniel Jones to stay as the quarterback, Mac. I'm not saying get rid of him, move on. I want him to continue. This is just saying who I would rather have if I could only have one of the two, Barkley or Daniel Jones. That's all it is. I want Daniel Jones to continue as a quarterback. He's had a good year. He's shown me he should continue as the Giant quarterback the next couple of years. Let's see how he performs in the next couple of years. But I'll sign him for the next couple of years. I'll work something out with him. You're my guy the next couple of years. But I want a team option on the third year. That's all I'm saying.
Great stuff.
Well, I guess if that's all. Yeah. Go ahead, Doc.
No, that's all good. I think and Pickles made a comment there. The average running back plays only 4 years. The quarterbacks play forever. I think the balance of power is you have to take the quarterback that can run the offense because, and again, I think you just go back to the Jets. The Jets haven't had a good quarterback in 100 years, and they can't get anywhere because they can't get any consistent quarterback play for any length of time.
Doc, there's one other question out there that we won't be able to use next week. I like the Rafael Devers contract.
Right. So the Red Sox traded Mookie Betts a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
And then this offseason, they lost Xander Bogaerts to the Padres. And now they just signed Rafael Devers to a big contract. And so the question is, was that a panic move? What were they doing? I think it was, in essence, I think it was a panic move. I think
11 years, $331 million. That's what we got to point out. 11 years, $331.
Here's the thing about that contract, which to me is quite interesting and doesn't make a whole lot of sense. I think the Red Sox fans would have gone crazy if they had lost Devers at the end of the year after they lost their other two great players. And so the idea was, look, we locked him up. We got him. But there's not a no trade clause in the contract, which means that the Red Sox can still move from him if somebody else is interested in picking him up. Which doesn't necessarily say to me that they're committed. I mean, when Bryce Harper signed that contract with the Phillies, he said, I'm going to be a Philly now for the rest of my life, and you can't trade me. That's a big part of it. No opt-outs and no trade clause. So Devers didn't get that. I think it was a move the Red Sox had to make to appease their fan base, because it's a team that seems to be in a lot of turmoil right now because they're losing their best players and they couldn't afford to lose one more.
It made me think of Reggie Jackson. When he came as a free agent to the Yankees, it was only a 5-year deal, and he didn't have a no-trade clause. He said, I figured they're paying me all that money, so I'm not going to ask for one. I think it was a panic move in the sense Devers is a wonderful hitter. He's a homegrown Red Sox, but as a third baseman, he's not a good defensive third baseman. He's got a way to go. So you're paying a guy basically $30 million a year for the next 11 years, guaranteed. And I didn't realize there was no trade, that Doc informed us of that, guys. But if he's not performing well, they're not going to be able to trade him for someone who's going to want to pick up that contract. And isn't there offense and defense? And I've looked at Devers' numbers. The numbers look good because he has a lot of at-bats. The more you bat, the more RBIs you're going to have, the more homers you're going to have. The numbers are going to look great. His batting average is respectable. I'm not sure his on-base percentage, how it stacks up, but I know defensively, watching him play, he's not good. He's improved somewhat. But then again, he was so bad defensively, you could do nothing but go up after a while. So I kind of feel it was a panic move, losing Betts and Bogarts. Yes, I question the contract. They should have locked him into a deal a couple of years ago at a more reasonable price. They're paying $30 million a year. That 11 years, that's a lot of money. The good thing is he'll be 37 when the contract runs out. So it's not taking him quite to 40, but we know players start slowing down in general when they're hitting the mid-30s. So I think the back end of that contract might really be bad for them. And maybe not even the back end, maybe the midway point of that contract might start becoming bad for them.
It's interesting because, right, you made a good point that he doesn't have a no trade, but if you have a bad contract, that's pretty much a no trade clause. Nobody wants it.
True.
Hey, you know what? We did it. You got some big NFL games coming this weekend. You've got let's hope Daniel Jones just goes on a tear and the Giants keep winning. That'll be fun.
I like Daniel Jones. I don't want you to think I don't.
Stop,
but I'm not as high on him as Matt.
Jack has a dartboard there with Daniel Jones picture on it. He throws darts at it every day.
I don't like the Giants. Mac, I don't know. Maybe I'm from that guy. I'm maybe turning into like the bodyguard from the movie The Drive and the Gazzo's Drive and Rocky, making remarks to these giant players. They'd be sitting in the back of the car.
Take it to the zoo.
Take it to the zoo. I'd say to Daniel Jones.
There you go.
Hey, what's the matter? He's in a bad mood, Rocky. He's always in a bad mood.
A couple of games today, Mac. I think I said I like the Chiefs over the Raiders, but the Chiefs are in a lock playing at Las Vegas. I could see them losing that game, but I'll pick them. And it's interesting, just Tennessee at Jacksonville. Jacksonville has won their last 4, and Tennessee has lost, their last 6? Yet they're playing for the division title today. And Tennessee's playing Joshua Dobbs, who's been a career backup, but at least knows how to run an offense. And they're playing him ahead of their touted rookie Malik Willis at the quarterback position. So that's going to be that's an interesting move. And it's a good move. Give me the guy who's competent on the center as opposed to a guy with potential in a game like this.
Well, like you, Jack, I'm taking Kansas City over Las
I like
Vegas.
Jackson. You like Jacksonville too, right? Today,
Jacksonville. Who are they playing against now?
Tennessee at Jacksonville for the division.
I go with Jacksonville. I like.
Yeah,
I think the home team there wins. But Las Vegas, Kansas City should be a really good game. That should be a really good game today. Yeah, I know who you're taking, Doc.
Yeah, I'm probably not watching those games, but that's all right. I would pick Patrick Mahomes just because. There you go.
All right. Well, yeah, that's.
Now I'm rooting for the Giants to beat the Eagles tomorrow, just so you and I could stick at the Pats.
Playoffs next week. That's when it
gets. There's going to be a lot of. Yeah, I mean, there's going to be a lot of players tomorrow that will be playing that won't play during the playoffs. I mean, the Giants are going to rest everybody. I would imagine the Eagles will do the same thing. They're both in the playoffs, so I think that's what's going to happen
Eagles have to win to be sure that they get the
true.
bye in the top seeds. Eagles in no position to rest guys. Giants, you can argue, that they couldn't,
Right.
All right, we did it. We made it to the top of the hour now. So, ladies and gentlemen, tomorrow is the NFL show. Same time, same place, same great sports network. Have yourselves a happy Saturday. And Mac and Jack and the football guys will see you tomorrow.